Max adjusted his uniform for what had to be the 5th time in the past minute, swallowing another deep breath as he stood outside Malinar's cabin. He had faced a lot in his life: disaster, loss, alien battlefields, existential crises. But this was different. This was a date, a tradition of her people, a shared dish meant to synchronize their emotional wavelengths. He still didn't quite understand how that worked, but then again he wasn't an empath. He reached for the panel, only for the door to slide open before he could touch it. Malinar stood there, arms crossed, one brow raised, an amused but exasperated look in her teal eyes. "You've been standing here for almost 5 minutes, she said, tapping the side of her head. "I could feel you're struggling." Max let out a short, embarrassed laugh. "Right, that's a thing." She shook her head with a soft chuckle, stepping closer as her eyes flicked down to his uniform. Her hands reached up, brushing at his shoulders, adjusting the fabric as if making sure it sat just right. "I'm surprised you're actually wearing this," she murmured. "I was pretty sure you were going to try and reject it." Max sighed. "I did. Cabo, in an aggressively fatherly way, forced me to take it." Ava's voice chimed in from a nearby console. Aggressively fatherly is an understatement. He listened to Max have a self-loathing crisis, then decided, "Yeah, no, that's dumb," and forcefully adopted him into the crew. "I can send the video file later." Malinar huffed a small laugh, shaking her head. "Later, Ava," she said, then gently took Max's hand and pulled him into her cabin. The space was dimly lit, warmer than the standard ship temperature, the scent of something sweet and savory lingering in the air. A small table sat in the center, a dish carefully set between 2 seats. Max studied the food, small, delicately arranged pieces that reminded him of sushi, though entirely plant-based. Some of the ingredients looked familiar from the hydroponics bay. Others he had no idea what they were. Malinar sat across from him, her expression more serious now. "This is a tradition among my people. We eat the same pieces at the same time. The shared sensory experience will allow me to feel what you feel, creating a stronger connection, if only temporarily." Max smiled at that. "Sounds like a pretty intimate way to form a connection." Malinar's ears twitched slightly, a hint of pink dusting her cheeks. "It is." He swallowed his nervousness, picked up one of the pieces, and waited for her to do the same. Together, they took the first bite. The flavors were rich and sweet, perfectly balanced by the oddly textured rice the ship's stores provided. It was delicious, so much so that his joy slipped past his usual emotional walls. Malinar blinked, then smiled softly. "I didn't think you'd enjoy my people's cooking that much." Max laughed, setting his piece down. "If the rest of your food is anything like this, I think I might be in trouble." She shook her head, amusement in her gaze. But there was something else there, too. Something deeper, something warmer. And for the first time in a long time, Max wasn't afraid of it. As they continued eating in sync, the conversation started slow, cautious. But as the meal went on, words came easier, barriers lowering one bite at a time. Max glanced at her as he picked up the next piece. "How old are you anyway?" Malinar gave a soft chuckle. "By human standards, about 22. My people don't place as much importance on exact age the way humans do." "Maturity comes when it comes," Max smirked. "Lucky. My species spends years stressing about hitting milestones. 18's a big deal where I'm from. You can drink, vote, enlist, get thrown into cryostasis, and wake up 10,000 years later." He shrugged. "You know, normal stuff?" She huffed a small laugh, shaking her head. "I don't think that last one is standard." His smirk faded into something more thoughtful. "No, guess not." A quiet moment passed before he spoke again. "My aunt died when I was 6. She and my mom were close. After that, my mom shut down. I don't think she ever really came back from it." His fingers toyed with the edge of his plate. "She was still there physically. But unless it was about science, she didn't engage. My dad tried. He did his best, but I needed her, and she just wasn't there." Malinar's ears lowered slightly, empathy radiating from her in quiet waves. "I'm sorry," he exhaled softly. "It left me wanting something I didn't even know I needed. So I buried myself in books, in equations, in things that actually spoke back to me. Science made sense. People didn't." Malinar nodded, glancing down at the dish between them. "I understand that more than you think." She picked up another piece, and he followed. "I was born with a stronger-than-average sensitivity to emotions," she admitted. "For my kind, it's rare, but not unheard of. Some call it a gift," she exhaled softly. "Others see it as a curse from the veil." Max frowned slightly. "Why a curse?" She hesitated. "Because it's hard to stop feeling, to shut it out when it becomes too much." Her fingers flexed slightly. I learned to close myself off, to focus, to regulate what I sense. It helps, but it also means I have to be careful how much I let myself feel. Max nodded, understanding. That makes sense. He hesitated, then said, I had a hard time talking to people, too. That's why I threw myself into studying. Science was the only thing my mom actually talked to me about. Malinar's gaze softened. That's why you studied so much? He shrugged. Part of it, yeah. A wry smile tugged at his lips. That and Mare, this girl from my colony program, used to tease me about it. Said I was trying to learn every subject so I wouldn't have to pick just one. Malinar tilted her head. Was she important to you? Max was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I think I might have had feelings for her. Once. A comfortable silence settled between them as they ate, each piece bringing them closer. Not just through conversation, but through something deeper, something neither of them had words for yet. Then, as they bit down on the last piece, something flipped. A warmth not his own bloomed in his chest. It was faint, distant, like a reflection in the dark, something just beyond reach. He blinked, caught off guard by the sensation. Malinar smiled softly. I was just projecting my emotions, letting you feel me in a way. Max met her gaze, a slow smile forming. Are you projecting your love? Her ears twitched and she looked away, but the blush on her cheeks was all the answer he needed. His grin widened. It's warm. Feels great, actually. He held her gaze when she finally looked back at him. I'd love to feel more. She exhaled a small laugh, shaking her head. You're impossible, he smirked. But different. A pause. Then quietly she nodded. Yes. Max let out a slow, measured breath, feeling the warmth of Malinar's emotions still lingering around him. It was different. This wasn't just the vague understanding of affection or the intellectual grasp of companionship he had constructed in his mind. It was real, tangible in a way nothing else had ever been. And for once he didn't fight it. He let her feel it. His own emotions, raw and uncertain, reached out across the fragile bridge she had formed between them. It wasn't as refined as hers, but it was honest. The way he liked her, the warmth and admiration, the sense of stability she gave him. And deeper still, something fragile and unformed. Something that might one day be love, if he let himself have it. Malinar's expression softened as her own emotions flowed back, stronger this time. A gentle embrace of affection, reassurance, and something else, something deeper. They were just two people, sitting together in the quiet space of her quarters, away from the pressures of duty, of expectations, of the past. Just them. Max exhaled and reached out, his fingers hesitating before finally intertwining with hers. Her fur was soft, a strange but pleasant contrast against his skin. He swallowed hard before speaking. I don't really understand this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Emotions, I've spent so long ignoring them, pushing them down. I never really let myself feel anything. Malina hummed, squeezing his hand gently. I know, she murmured, her voice warm, patient. I could feel it. How much you were holding back. How much you've always held back. Max clenched his jaw. My mother, she wasn't cold, not exactly. But after my aunt died, she just shut down. And He hesitated, tightening his grip slightly. I didn't know how to reach her. My dad tried, but I needed her, and she was only ever present when it came to science. So I threw myself into it. It was the only time she looked at me like I mattered. Malinar's fingers wove through his, her presence a steadying force. And when she was gone, Max let out a hollow chuckle. Then there was nothing left. Silence hung between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, shared in the space between his words and her presence. Malinar shifted, moving a little closer, resting lightly against him. I understand, Max. Maybe more than you think. He swallowed, nodding slowly. His fingers curled around hers for a moment before he forced himself to continue. I didn't realize what I did to you. When I saved Tashar, his voice was quiet, tinged with something raw. Not until I remembered. When my mother got the news about my aunt. She vomited. The shock, the grief, her whole world just stopped. He inhaled sharply. And I did the same thing to you. Malinar's expression was unreadable, but he could feel what she was thinking. The way her emotions stirred. Pain, understanding, something deeper than words. You weren't wrong, he admitted, his voice trembling. I didn't care if I got out. I only cared that Tashar lived. I saw myself as expendable. Malinar's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she reached up, brushing her fingers against his jaw, grounding him. Max. He shook his head, swallowing against the lump in his throat. I'm expendable, he whispered. Or at least that's how I see myself. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere. The aurora is gone. Everyone I knew is gone. And I'm just—" His voice broke. "I'm just some relic that happened to survive." Malinar exhaled sharply. Then, before he could react, she pulled him into a firm embrace. He stiffened at first, caught off guard, but then he let himself relax. Let himself melt into the warmth of her, the steady presence that held him together when everything else threatened to fracture apart. Her voice was soft against his ear. "You did it because you didn't think anyone cared about you. Because you didn't want to believe anyone would care. Because if no one cared, then it wouldn't hurt when they were gone." Max trembled, his grip tightening on her fur. Her words cut too close, too deep. His emotions flared again. Grief, guilt, fear. But then he felt her. That warmth. That steady, unwavering presence. "Malinar," and he grounded himself in that. His next words were weak, barely above a whisper. "I've been seeing myself as disposable for so long because I'm too stupid and emotionally broken to accept anyone." Malinar pulled back just enough to look at him. Then, without hesitation, pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You're not broken," she murmured, her voice steady, certain. "You're scrambled, lost, because no one was there to help you find your way." Her fingers brushed against his cheek, tilting his chin so he had no choice but to meet her gaze. "But I am here. And you should know something, Max." She smiled, soft and sure. Valkyria very possessive. Max let out a breathless laugh, a little shaky but real. "So what? You're telling me I have an empathetic, possessive girlfriend with actual claws?" Malinar smirked. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." He chuckled, some of the tension in his chest easing. "Great. Then I guess that makes me your emotionally idiotic death world genius for a boyfriend?" Her expression softened. "Yes, you are." Max leaned into her, closing his eyes for a moment, just letting himself exist in this space, with her, because of her. Then, softly, she spoke again. "If you really mean that apology, if you really want to make things right, then you'll keep your promise." Max inhaled, then without hesitation agreed, and the moment he did, Malinar smiled. She tilted his chin up once more, and before he could process it, her lips were on his, warm, certain, full of everything she had been holding back. Max's breath hitched, and then he melted into it, into her. She projected her love into the kiss, and it was overwhelming, consuming. His mind spun, his body shivered, but he didn't pull away. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, he let himself feel. Max's breath was still uneven when Malinar finally broke the kiss. Her teal eyes, still shimmering with the lingering connection of their emotions, held his gaze as she traced a gentle finger along his cheek. "If you make that promise," she murmured, her voice soft yet firm, "and you do something reckless again, if you throw yourself into danger without any drive to make it out alive, I will personally drag you back from the veil just to dump you myself." Max huffed out a soft laugh, shaking his head. "So not even death can save me from getting dumped." Malinar's only response was a quick slap of her tail against his arm, the thump carrying just enough force to make her point. He smirked at her, but she only chuckled and leaned back slightly. "You are by far the worst first date I've ever had." Max looked away, shifting uncomfortably, unsure if she was joking or being serious. Malinar caught his chin with 2 fingers, guiding his gaze back to her. "But," she continued, her voice warmer now, "it was also one of the most revealing and intimate syncs I've ever experienced. That means more to me." His lips curled into a small, hesitant smile. "Sorry for being so difficult." She hummed, a quiet sound of approval, and shifted in place. Before he could react, she settled herself into his lap, her arms wrapping around him in a slow, deliberate motion. The heat of her body, the softness of her fur against his skin, was grounding in a way he hadn't expected. "You radiate like a star, Max," she murmured, pressing a hand over his heart as if she could feel its beat beneath his uniform. "Your emotions, they burn bright. It's overwhelming sometimes, silencing everything else." His mental walls, the ones he had instinctively raised again, flickered back into place. But Malinar only tilted his chin up, her gaze locking onto his once more. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "The depth of it, the sheer force of what you feel, it's breathtaking. And if you want to hide, that's fine. But not when we're alone. Not when it's just us." Max swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling into his chest. He hesitated for only a second before leaning into her, resting his forehead against her shoulder and taking a deep breath. Her scent, something soft and familiar now, filled his senses, and he let go again. For once, he let himself be here. Not in the past, not in the aching, hollow grief that had shaped him, but in this moment, with her. Malinar felt it, and she smiled, tightening her arms around him as she held him close. His emotions, unstable, uncertain, but so deep, swirled around her like a technicolor star, brilliant and raw. And for now that was enough. For a moment, the quiet between them was warm, almost comforting. Then, Malinar felt something shift, an undercurrent of curiosity tinged with dread radiating from Max. His body tensed beneath her, his gaze flickering to something behind her, unfocused but intense. She pulled back slightly, tilting her head. "What is it?" Max swallowed hard, his blue eyes locked on a point over her shoulder. Malinar followed his line of sight and felt her chest tighten as her eyes landed on the small sculpture resting on the shelf behind her. It was made of crystal wood, its delicate surface still polished despite the years. Koda had carved it himself, one of the first pieces he ever gifted her after they met. Max exhaled softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's Koda's work, isn't it?" Malinar's ears flicked, surprise flashing through her. She hadn't told him that. "It's beautiful," Max continued, the weight of his words settling between them. She studied him, confusion creeping in. "How do you know that?" Max's gaze lingered on the sculpture, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he answered. "It looks like you, wearing a veil." His voice was careful and thoughtful. "But the posture, the way it's carved, there's pride in it. Wisdom. It's subtle, but—" He hesitated, eyes flicking to hers before continuing. "If you look closely, there are hollow spaces beneath the veil. He carved you beneath it, hidden but still present." Malinar's breath hitched. Few people noticed that detail. Even when she pointed it out, most didn't understand its significance. Even she forgot it was there sometimes. Yet Max had seen it instantly. He hadn't just looked at the sculpture, he had understood it. Her heart pounded. Max's mind, so sharp, so perceptive, had unraveled the intent behind that delicate carving in mere seconds. It was a tribute to her people's beliefs about the veil, the passage between life and memory, a representation of her strength and her burdens. Malinar shifted on his lap, leaning back slightly. Her fingers moved instinctively to grab the sculpture, to push it out of sight, but Max's hand caught her wrist. "Don't," he whispered. His grip wasn't forceful, but the flood of emotions that surged from him, resolve, compassion, something deeper, stilling her completely. Malinar's ears flattened. "It's not right," she said, shaking her head. "I shouldn't have left it out." Max held her gaze, his expression unreadable at first. Then he gently pulled her arm back toward him. "It's part of you," he said, his voice steady. "Part of your past, your history. You shouldn't erase it just to make things easier." His lips pressed together for a moment before he added, "That's not how good relationships with humans work." She hesitated. Max exhaled sharply, gathering his thoughts before speaking again. "My dad tried to erase my aunt's death," he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost fragile. "Pretended she never existed. My mom never really healed from it. They thought ignoring the grief would make it go away. But it doesn't work like that. It just festers." His fingers tightened slightly around her wrist, his blue eyes burning with sincerity. "I won't let you erase Koda. I won't let you pretend he didn't change you. He mattered. And if you need to grieve, I'll be here. Like you've been for me." Malinar gasped softly. She felt him, his sincerity, his pain, his love. She had spent so long locking that part of herself away, burying it under duty and professionalism. But Max wouldn't let her. For a moment, she wanted to pull away and retreat behind her walls like she always did. But Max's arms slowly wrapped around her again, drawing her close, holding her tight. "If I have to be honest," he murmured against her fur, "if I can't keep hiding what I feel, neither can you." Malinar's resolve shattered. She clung to him, her body trembling as a choked sob escaped her lips. The grief, the ache she had buried for over a year finally surfaced, and this time, she didn't have to face it alone. Max held her, letting her sob into his chest, feeling the warmth of her body against his own. He said nothing, because there was nothing to say. He hadn't known Koda. He only knew what little Malinar had told him, the fragments of memory and feeling she'd shared. But at the same time, he did know Koda. In the way a man knows a kindred spirit, he never got the chance to meet. Koda had been brilliant, a mind sharp enough to carve beauty from unyielding crystal wood, to see the world in ways others didn't. He had loved Malinar, and she had loved him. And Max knew, deep in his bones, that losing him had shattered her in a way she had never allowed herself to admit. Until now, her sobs came in waves, her entire frame trembling as grief she had locked away for over a year surged free. Her claws dug into his tunic, clinging to him as if afraid he'd disappear too. Max let her. He didn't flinch when her sorrow spilled over into him, her empathic abilities overwhelming his own walls. It hit like a tidal wave, raw and unfiltered, anguish, regret, love, loss. For a split second, it felt like he had known Koda, like he could feel the shape of him in Malinar's heart, in the empty space he had left behind. The pain was staggering. Max shuddered but didn't let go. Instead, he held her tighter, his hand tracing slow, soothing circles on her back. It wasn't much, but it was what he could do. And he understood. When he had learned the fate of the Aurora, Malinar had felt his grief like a supernova. Sharp, all-consuming, a pain too vast to contain. She had nearly collapsed under the sheer weight of it. But she had stayed. She had been there. Now it was his turn. Malinar's breath hitched as she clung to him, her body shaking with the force of her grief. "I couldn't save him," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper against his chest. Max closed his eyes, resting his chin atop her head. "I know. I should have. There was nothing you could have done," he murmured, tightening his embrace. "You weren't there. It wasn't your fault." She let out a strangled sound, something between a sob and a bitter laugh. "I tell myself that," she admitted, voice thick with emotion. "But it never stops feeling like a lie." Max exhaled slowly. He knew that feeling. "I get it," he said softly. "I really do." Because hadn't he done the same? Told himself over and over again that there was nothing he could have done to save the Aurora? That it wasn't his fault? That he had been a kid? And it wasn't fair to expect himself to have stopped the catastrophe that had claimed everyone he'd ever known. And yet it still felt like a lie. Malinar pulled back just enough to look up at him, her teal eyes shining with unshed tears. "How do you live with it?" Max swallowed. "I don't know," he admitted. "You just do. Some days it's easier. Some days it's not." Her ears flattened slightly, and she searched his face as if looking for answers. He had none to give, but he could offer her this. "I'm here," he said. "And I'm not going anywhere." A fresh wave of emotion surged through their bond, and Malinar let out a shuddering breath before pressing her forehead against his chest. And for a long time neither of them spoke. They just existed, wrapped in each other's arms, in grief, in understanding, in something that for the first time in a long while felt real. Malinar let out a shaky breath, her body finally relaxing against Max's. The weight of grief still lingered between them, but it was no longer suffocating. She felt the warmth of his arms, the steady rise and fall of his chest, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply be. She had stained his tunic with her tears, projected every ounce of her sorrow into him, and yet he hadn't pulled away. He hadn't flinched. As she pulled back slightly, Max loosened his hold, one hand rising to gently wipe away the lingering tears on her cheeks. He smiled, soft, understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "I'll never be a replacement for Coda, but I'll do my best to honor and cherish you just as much." Malinar's throat tightened, and she could only nod. Slowly she rested her forehead against his, closing her eyes as she exhaled a deep sigh. "I know you're not him," she murmured, "but sometimes I see you the same way, like two copies of the same soul." She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it makes it hard." Max didn't pull away. He let the silence settle, let the weight of her words linger between them. Then, after a moment, he took a breath and hesitated before speaking. "There's something you should see." His tone was careful, reluctant but certain. "Ava has a recording of Cabo, effectively calling me an idiot for not taking the tunic, and then, aggressively adopting me into the crew." He rubbed the back of his neck, his usual nervous tic when saying something he wasn't entirely sure about. Malinar blinked and tilted her head, a small, amused huff escaping her. "Are you seriously suggesting I watch that?" Max exhaled heavily. "Look, I don't want you to because I was being dumb, but I'm also kind of curious about what you think of how Cabo handled it." Malinar hummed, considering his words. Then, after a beat, a small smirk curled at the edges of her lips. Instead of answering, she tugged him toward her bed. Max nearly tripped. She glanced over her shoulder, eyes gleaming with something softer now, something almost playful. "I have a better idea," she said. "I read that humans watch movies for entertainment." She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled him closer. "I want to watch one, while cuddling." Max's breath hitched, and he stopped dead in his tracks. His brain short-circuited. Are you sure?" he asked, voice a little higher than he would have liked. That's a lot more intimate than I expected for a first date." His heart was hammering, and he knew she could feel it. Malinar sighed, her tail flicking over his arm as she leaned back slightly. "I made you promise something very difficult for humans," she reminded him, her voice quieter now, more certain. "Because of that, I don't see a reason to hold back. I don't know what you'll do in the future, but I do know that you'll fight to make it back harder now." She met his gaze, teal eyes unwavering. "And that's enough for me to let you in a bit more." Max swallowed hard, his nerves alight. The idea of being that close, in her bed, sent his heart into overdrive. He forced himself to push past the anxiety, even as he knew she could feel every bit of it. With as much control as he could muster, he cleared his throat and said, "Okay, let's watch something light, something funny, something relaxing." Malinar chuckled, tugging him down beside her. "Sounds perfect." Max hesitated near the edge of Malinar's bed, running through movie options in his mind. He hadn't really thought about what to watch, just that it was a simple movie night. Something easy, comfortable. That plan started to fall apart when Malinar gave him a look and asked, "Take off your tunic." His brain stalled. What?" Malinar huffed, amused and slightly exasperated. "I'm getting comfortable. You should too. Just turn around while I change." Max swallowed and nodded, pulling off his boots before unfastening his tunic and draping it over a chair. His undershirt and crew pants would have to be comfortable enough. Facing the wall, he heard the soft rustle of fabric behind him. He tried not to think about it. A few moments later, Malinar hummed in approval. "All right, you can turn around." Max turned, and immediately regretted it. Or maybe he didn't. His brain short-circuited at the sight of Malinar in what was essentially a tube top and shorts, her short blue-gray fur accentuating the curve of her form. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, his thoughts crashing into each other in a pile-up of stunned confusion. Malinar tilted her head, ears flicking. "You're acting strange." Max forced himself to focus, dragging his gaze away. No, just wasn't expecting that." She glanced down at herself. "This?" She smirked, tail flicking lazily. "It's just something comfortable, right? Comfortable. For her. For him, it was a direct attack on his ability to think straight. Before he could embarrass himself further, he blurted the first movie that came to mind. "Atlantis, the Lost Empire!" Malinar raised a brow ridge, clearly sensing his frantic attempt to redirect his thoughts. A second later, Ava materialized in her holographic form near the projector. "Excellent choice, Max. An animated classic of adventure and discovery. Shall I start it now? Or do you two need a moment to process your emotional turbulence?" Max shot her a glare. "Just start the movie, Ava." Malinar chuckled, slinking onto the bed and motioning for him to join her. He did, settling back against the headboard, only for her to wrap around him. Her legs curled around his, arms draped gently over his torso, head resting against his chest. Her tail wound around the arm he had resting against her back. Max went completely still. He had faced down Kernaf raiders. He had survived a bioweapon masquerading as ice. But this was dangerous in a completely different way. She felt right against him. Her warmth, her presence, the soft hum of her breathing. Malinar shifted slightly, adjusting against him, then let out a slow exhale. "Relax, Max, relax." "Relax?" His heart was trying to punch its way out of his chest. She made a thoughtful sound, then whispered, "I'm sorry if this is making you uncomfortable." Max stiffened, scrambling for words. "No, I mean—" He cleared his throat. "It's not that. Before he could fumble into something incredibly stupid, she continued, voice gentle. "I can feel it, you know." His breath hitched. She traced a slow, deliberate circle on his chest. "Your affection, your love for me." Her voice softened. "And beneath it, a growing well of desire." Max nearly choked. "Malinar," she chuckled, pressing a calming hand against his chest. "It's not a bad thing," she reassured him. "I like feeling wanted." A pause. "But we've never actually talked about this." Max swallowed. "Talked about what exactly?" she hummed. "My people have a cycle, Max. I won't be in the right headspace for anything like that for a few more weeks." She lifted her head to meet his gaze. "If you behave and keep your word, we can discuss it when the time comes. But until then, remember that I'm not human." Her words settled in his mind, clearing the haze of tangled thoughts. She was right. She wasn't human, and applying human standards to her was dishonest, not to mention a little insulting. He let out a breath, nodding. "You're right. I'm sorry. I was overthinking it." Malinar smiled, eyes gleaming with something playful. "I could tell you something else about my people." Max raised an eyebrow. "What?" She leaned in slightly, her breath warm against his ear. "Sleeping in clothes is uncomfortable for us." Max's brain crashed. Malinar grinned as he turned stiff as a board. "Relax, Max," she purred, nestling against him. "It's just a movie." Before he could even process a response, the film started playing, and Max resigned himself to barely surviving this night. For the next 90 minutes, Max forced himself to focus on Atlantis, the familiar story grounding him while Malinar stayed wrapped around him like she belonged there. And the truth was, it wasn't so scary after all. Once his nerves settled, he found himself enjoying it. The warmth, the quiet presence, the way she occasionally reacted to the film with soft noises of curiosity. By the time the credits rolled, he felt at peace. Malinar lifted her head and studied him for a long moment, then, without warning, leaned up and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to his lips. It wasn't demanding, wasn't rushed. It was warm, affirming, a promise. As she pulled back, she murmured, "You are mine now." Max's heart stumbled over itself. Then, with a smirk, she added, "But you're not ready to stay the night." Max blinked, flustered. What?" She chuckled, untangling herself and stretching. "Not yet." She nudged his shoulder. "Go. Get some rest. Tomorrow is another day." Still stunned, Max slowly stood, grabbing his tunic and boots with robotic movements. As he made his way to the door, Malinar gave him one last, knowing smile. "Sweet dreams, Max." Max, barely keeping himself together, nodded. You too." And with that, he stepped into the corridor, the door sliding shut behind him. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Max rubbed his eyes as he sat up in his bunk, stretching as the last remnants of sleep clung to his mind. His first date with Malinar had been a lot. The openness, the dinner, the connotation, then the movie and the cuddle that followed. He had enjoyed it, truly. Sharing Atlantis with her had been a nostalgic delight, something warm and familiar in the vast unknown. But she had also broken his brain, twice. Her choice of comfortable clothing had sent his thoughts spinning. And then, with that damn teasing glint in her teal eyes, she had casually mentioned her usual sleeping habits. His face burned just remembering it. She had done it on purpose, he knew it, and the way she had curled around him during the movie had only made it worse. Or better. He still wasn't sure. Still, he found himself smiling. Despite everything, he felt lighter this morning, as if some unseen weight had lifted. Malinar had gently but firmly kicked him out of her cabin after the movie, making sure they both had time to process. They had agreed to keep things moving forward, to figure things out together. That was good. With a groan, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up. He had work to do. First, a check-in on the bridge. Then a visit to engineering to help with his new survival suit. But before all that, daily workouts with the Altheadans. He wasn't about to miss that. After a quick shower and dressing in his new official light blue tunic, he had to admit it was an improvement over the provisional copper. Max made his way to the bridge. Cabo stood near the captain's chair, arms folded, watching as the crew moved through their routines. As Max approached, the Altheadan captain glanced at him and let out a small approving huff. "The new uniform suits you," Cabo said, his yellow eyes appraising. "Better than that provisional copper." Max exhaled, already knowing where this was going. "Not like I had a choice," he muttered, standing at ease. Cabo gave a deep chuckle. "You belong here, Max." The words hit something deep inside him, something he wasn't sure how to name. Even after 3 months aboard the Horizon, some part of him still wrestled with the idea of truly being here. But arguing with Cabo about it was pointless. The Altheadan had aggressively adopted him in a fatherly way, and resistance was futile. Before he could formulate a response, a familiar presence approached. Malinar. She brushed past him with a soft smile, placing a gentle kiss against his cheek, just as her tail slapped him playfully toward the door. "Off with you," she teased, her voice warm. Max blinked, startled as Cabo let out another deep chuckle. He could already hear Ava somewhere in the ship laughing at him. With a small shake of his head, he exited the bridge, his mind drifting toward her, toward them, toward the unknown future ahead. And for once, the thought didn't scare him. Max's mind was adrift, lost in a pleasant haze of thoughts. Malinar's teasing smirk, the way she had curled up next to him during the movie, the warmth of her touch. It all replayed in his mind like a loop he didn't mind being stuck in. His thoughts drifted further, beyond the present, to the uncertain yet enticing possibilities of what the future could hold. He barely registered the clang of metal before something whizzed past his head, snapping him back to reality. A ratchet bounced off a console and clattered to the floor. His instincts kicked in, and he turned sharply to find Ziphian standing there, all 4 arms crossed, her red eyes narrowed in an unmistakable glare. "Are you done daydreaming, or should I throw something bigger next time?" she grumbled, antennae twitching in irritation. Max blinked. What? "You were standing there like a defective drone for a full minute," she huffed, gesturing toward the workstation. "I need you focused, especially since we're rebuilding a suit from scratch." You do remember why we have to do this, right? Max sighed, rubbing his neck. Yeah. Because I ditched my last one to save Tashar. Ziphian scowled but didn't argue the point. Exactly. So unless you plan on making another donation to the planetoid surface, pay attention. Zildjian, her father and the ship's chief engineer, chose that moment to step in, his posture far less hostile but no less expectant. Do you have a design ready yet? That, at least, snapped Max fully into gear. Shoving his lingering thoughts aside, he pulled out his survival tablet, tapping through his files before flagging one for Ava. Projecting now. Ava's voice chimed in as a holographic model materialized between them. The design flickered to life, sleek, compact, and unmistakably human. Unlike his last EVA suit, which had been designed solely for survival at all costs, this one was an evolution, a fully modular explorer suit, modeled after the 36th century designs his colony would have used. It had the streamlined functionality of an interstellar council survival suit, but with an added human edge. Zildjian studied the projection with a practiced eye, his lower arms tapping at his datapad while his upper ones stroked his mandibles. Interesting. Compact life support system, emergency redundancies. The material composition is adaptable for extreme conditions. His gaze sharpened. But this exoframe substructure, it provides strength and stability in high-gravity environments, Max explained. Also helps with mobility and zero-G, built-in reinforcement for impact resistance, too. Ziphian gave a slow nod of approval. With this, you won't have an excuse to ditch it for speed. It'll be fast. That was the goal. With the groundwork set, they got to work, dissecting the design piece by piece, identifying which aspects of human technology could be replaced with superior council tech, and which outdated human features needed to stay, because they served a deeper function. Max had to push back a few times, insisting on what looked like an unnecessary subsystem, until he explained how it worked in conjunction with other features. The Cordians, meticulous as ever, grumbled but conceded when his reasoning checked out.